Hey everyone, and welcome to my build of AMT's USS Enterprise NCC-1701-C, an Ambassador class starship, which of course was instrumental in the fates of both the Federation and the Klingon Empire, preventing a devastating war between the two, as seen in Star Trek The Next Generation's Yesterday's Enterprise. And so it's a kit that's pretty old now. It was first released in 1998, and this particular print was from 2011. So it's a fairly simple kit, and yeah, as you can see here, just a few parts for the main sections, an extensive decal sheet including battle damage, and two options for the Enterprise and the USS Yamaguchi. And just speeding through the builds now, just because it's a really simple construction and there wasn't really anything to look out for. It's just the usual case of cleaning up parts, fitting them together as well as you can, and just sanding back the seams. Of course, the fit in some places wasn't perfect, but it's a kit that's well over 20 years old now, so that's kind of forgivable. But the mould quality of the detail, especially on the saucer, was actually really good for the time. It's quite sharp and quite well defined, especially the phaser strips and the grid lines. So definitely no complaints there. And the pylons are a nice sturdy construction, so there was a minimal twisting or warping, excuse the pun, for the warp engine alignment. So everything was pretty straight and steady, and it's just a case of removing that seam line down the middle. I got most of it out, but there's still a couple of little bits you can still see it. And then just smoothing out the seam line down the tail end. And of course using a metal file to smooth out those ribbed sections of the neck. And the impulse engine assembly was quite difficult to hide all of those seams, so I just kind of left that how it was. And then the stand connector is this huge, big, ugly, bulky thing. I could have sanded that back, I suppose, but yeah, I just left it how it was, since you don't really see it much once it's placed on the stand. And then the pylons slot nicely into the back of the secondary hull. Then I just used a bit of Vallejo plastic putty to minimise that gap in the join. And wiping it away, you can hardly see any putty that's left, so the gap wasn't too bad. This kind of putty is really good just for really real simple seams. You can just kind of apply it and then just wipe away the excess. And a little bit there for the lower hanger deck. Now the next step is to apply some primer, and for that I'm using Tamiya's Fine Surface Primer from a spray can. And so with the primer down, I'm going to do a base coat of Vallejo Model Air White Grey. So I just sprayed the white grey on the areas that are needed and just left off the rest, because most of this is going to be painted a couple of different shades of blue. And it's quite an intricate pattern, especially on the top of the saucer. Now this is a smaller scale Enterprise C that I did a while back as part of that Enterprise set. And as you can see, there's kind of rings and wedges all around the saucer. So one of the challenging parts of building this kit, especially with no masks or decals, is just how do you mask off and paint all of these circle segments. And I thought about some different solutions, just measuring the radius with a compass and then drawing it out on masking tape, but then how do you accurately cut around a circle without a guide. Also using bendy masking tape just to mask around the different rings. But then I thought, well, the kit has got all of these grooves for the shield grid, So why not just take advantage of that? So what I'm going to do is, I've got some nice thick masking tape, and I just bought this at a hardware store. It's a medium tackiness, so it doesn't leave any residue and it doesn't stick too hard to the model. So first I want to mask off the white grey ring around the edge. So what I'm going to do is just get the masking tape and just lay it against the model there. And I'm just going to use a cotton swab just to press down the masking tape, just to get it into those grooves, just to make it a bit easier to cut. So you can see there it's created a nice depression along the masking tape. So now basically what I need to do is just get a hobby knife, and I've got a fresh sharp blade, so it makes cutting a lot easier. I just need to carefully cut along that line using the groove as a guide. Alright, so mostly wet, I've just got a little bit of hangover. Alright, so there's that section of ring successfully masked. Now I just need to go around all of the edge and then start on the middle section. Alright, so that's those sections masked up. Now I just need to figure out which order I'm going to do light blue versus dark blue. And for those colours I've got a mix of Vallejo Model Air Sky Blue and Vallejo Model Air Russian AF Blue. And I'm going to use a mix of these because neither of these colours are quite right. This one needs to be a little bit darker, this one just a little bit lighter. So I'm just going to experiment with different ratios of these and then start painting up some patterns. Alright, so that's all the masking for the saucer done. There's a few areas that I need to clean up, and I'll just hand paint those back to clean them up a bit. But other than that, I think that technique worked really well. You can't really tell it's been cut along those grid lines. There's a couple of places where I went off course a little bit, and you can see slice marks here and there, but yeah, I can't even find where it was now, so no big issue really. And moving on to the secondary hull, again there's quite a complex pattern here that I need to mask off. So I've pre-painted it the dark blue because all of these grid lines are outlined in the darker blue and then filled in with the lighter blue. So I've painted on the darker blue first, and then we're going to mask off the lines using just strips of tape, and then paint over the light blue, and then paint the rest the white grey. So there's a bit of order of operations you've got to think about with this kit, with all the different layers of colours. But yeah, it's not turning out to be too much of a hassle. And there's a few more panel lines that I'll need to mask off with the light blue and then paint over with the white grey, just to get a bit of panelling in there. Right, so there's the secondary hull masked up and ready for painting. And yeah, it's a long and tedious job, but it's going to be worth it in the end. So I'm going to spray over the white grey over this light blue, and so everything that's masked when I peel it off will be the light blue panels. And the same for the engines, so they've had a base of the light blue, and I'll just go over with the white grey. And I've based most of the striping off the smaller kit here, because this is a good reference. The studio model photos are quite hard to see exactly where all the stripes are, but hopefully this is mostly accurate. I've got all different thicknesses, so I just had this is 6mm thickness tape, and I just measured it up and cut it into various thicknesses. So that's like 3mm, then 1mm, and then there's the 2mm flexible tape on there. Just a few little square panels dotted around. Right, so time to start painting. Now I've finished all of the masking and spraying, and most of the work was done on the secondary hull, of course. So there's the result of all the panelling and the striping, and the warp nacelles. They're just masked off and sprayed those ribs along the top, and a bit of yellow for that section there, and a few more panels here and there. So it was just a matter of just masking each area one by one, just working up the layers. And yeah, so that was quite a long task, but glad to have finished all of that now. So the next step is to seal all of this paint in with a coat of Tamiya's TS13 clear. Now moving on to the transparent parts. So I've sprayed all of these just with basic Vallejo model colour, transparent blue and transparent red for the beside collectors. And for the warp engine grille, I'm going to experiment a bit. So I've painted the back with a transparent blue. Now I'm going to spray over some copper, and then I'm going to try and wipe it away from the raised ribs, so it just leaves it in the recessed areas, just to see how that looks. I may end up wiping it all back if it doesn't look very good, but I kind of want to give it that sort of halfway between powered down and lit up look. That Enterprise C was heavily battle damaged. It was on minimal power, and I kind of want to give a hint of the studio model, which all of the Star Trek ships had that kind of coppery brass look to all of the warp engine grills. So let's give that a go and see how it goes. Alright, so that's the nacelles mostly complete. I'm still going to paint up these just a different shade of yellow. And I've painted around the frame of this beside collector. I also sprayed just a little bit of light splotches of black inside over the red, just to give it that much more of a darker sort of patchy look that you see on screen. And yeah, there's a bit of gap showing up between the grill and the housing there, but that's fine for a kit that's probably what, over 20 years old now. So now it's time to move on to detail painting, and starting with the saucer. So I'm just going to go around and paint up all of the lifeboats, the bridge dome, phaser strips, and some other bits of details around the ABC deck, and the reaction control thrusters, navigation lights. So I'll just be using basic colours. I think I'll use a white for the lifeboats, a medium grey for the phasers, and also an old trick that I used on my previous Enterprise C, just a black liner pen. This is 0.05 millimeters thick, and I'll just use that to go in and draw in all of the window ports. And then we'll be close to putting on some decals. So painting on this white is definitely going to need 2 or 3 thin coats just to get that coverage and remove all of the brush marks. So that's all of the windows finally done, and there's the lower section of the saucer. Just painted an extra blue circle in the middle there for the lower sensor. And yeah, just to point out, the reason I didn't use a black wash for these windows like I usually would have done is just because some of these windows are actually moulded as part of the grid line grooves. So if I was to put a wash, say in that window port there, then the wash would have moved up and down all these grid lines, since it's part of the same recess, and that's definitely what you don't want, to get wash in all of these grid lines. So yeah, it was just easy enough just to draw them all in, so at least they're all consistent in the same colour, instead of just using a wash for some of them and drawing some of them in. So yeah, that's why I went for the pen method. So now I'm going to do another coat of Tamiya's clear, just to seal in all of the pen ink, because the next step is going to get quite wet and I don't want all of this black ink to run out. Right, now with the gloss coat down, it's time to start applying the decals. And way before I started this build, I just tested out one of the decals. This was for the USS Yamaguchi nameplate there, just to test that the decals are still in workable condition, since this was last printed in 2011, which is 11 years ago now. And it all went fine, so happy to continue using these. And of course, having said that, the very first decal I put down has started to break up. But hopefully I can just gently move it into position without any more cracks. It did not happen on the test decal, so I'm a bit surprised it's done this, but maybe some of these just aren't going to hold up as well. And also I've just realised that this particular registry marking is way too small than what it should be. So here's how it looks on the 2500 scale Enterprise C. As you can see, it's a lot bigger there. It extends way beyond the phaser strip there, whereas this one appears to be quite a bit smaller. And checking photos of the studio model, it's more in line with the smaller scale Enterprise. So yeah, bit of a slight error there in the size of the decal, but anyway, moving on. Alright, so now time for the ultimate test. This is one of the biggest decals in the set, so let's see how well this one holds up. So these decals here that go around the rim of the saucer look a bit scary considering how brittle these are, so what I'm going to do is just cut each one in half, so hopefully half of it will be a bit easier to handle, and then we'll see how it goes. And now with all of those decals set, I'm applying generous amounts of microsol over each decal just to help it settle into all of the recesses to make it as flat as possible. Alright, so there it is all put together from the underside. And once the saucer was together, I did notice there's quite a big gap just along this section of saucer rim here. So I might take care of that with a bit of that plastic putty and then just paint over the white grey of the rim over the top. I've also got a few other details to finish up, such as the navigation lights and just a couple of other bits and pieces of tidy up work. But I'll leave that for the next part of this build, because I'm going to wrap up this video now and just take some time to appreciate the Enterprise C as it was designed, fresh and clean from dry dock, because unfortunately she's about to have a date with the Romulans, and I shall leave that for the next part. And so I hope you've enjoyed the build up so far, and thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next part. So until then, let's make sure history never forgets the name Enterprise.